please welcome to the stage the writer, director, Oscar winner, Cord Jefferson. And Stephanie Troutman-Robbins. Welcome, Cord. Yes. Come on over there. I'll get this to you. And our moderator, Stephanie Troutman-Robbins.
Thank you all so much for being here. This is, I have a lot of tremendous memories from the Loft. This was a big part of my childhood, so showing a movie here back in my hometown is just a dream come true. So it's a real honor that you're all here. Thank you so much.
It's so great to have you, and
Thank you.
wonderful to see the film again, and thanks to everyone in the audience for coming out. So I imagine our plan is that I will start off the conversation with just a few questions, and then we'll open up to the audience. So I will jump right in.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about the writing journey for you. I know at the risk of a little redundancy from
No, it's
earlier,
okay.
but new audience. When did you know that like writing was your path, and sort of tell us a little about that journey?
So my mother said that she knew that I was going to be a writer from a very young age. She said it was she said in third grade we were assigned to write and illustrate our own books about our lives, and she said she'd never seen me more excited about a school project. And so I just always knew that I really loved to read, I loved to write. But, you know, my mom's an educator, my father is a lawyer. I didn't know anybody who made art for a living. It sort of felt like that wasn't for me. It felt like people who made art for a living lived in New York or Los Angeles or Paris. And so I just assumed that I would go to law school one day to make my parents happy, and then I would sort of write on the nights and weekends to actually enjoy myself. And so I worked on the high school newspaper, and then I founded a literary magazine in college, but outside of that, I didn't really ever pursue it. And so I found this, right out of college, I had this day job as a communications director of this very small nonprofit in LA. And at night I would come home and write, and I would just write stories or essays or just anything that came to me, because it sort of was the one thing that kept me sane, because I didn't have a job that allowed me to be creative. And so one day I bumped into a guy who was one of my neighbors, and it turned out that he was an editor at a music magazine called Filter, and he asked me to start writing pieces for them. And shortly after that, I just became a full-time freelance journalist. I was making so little money in my day job that I started making an equivalent amount of money as a freelance journalist, and I felt like if I'm going to make no money, I should at least make no money doing something that doesn't make me hate myself every day. And so I quit and just started freelance journalism, and I was a journalist for about 8 or 9 years in various capacities. I was freelancing in LA, and then I went to New York, and then I was a White House reporter in DC for a little bit, and then back to LA, back to New York. And so I did that until 2014, when a guy from a TV show reached out to me and said he'd read some of my journalism and asked me if I would come write for his TV show. And so that was February of 2014, so almost 10 years exactly.
So writing in these different contexts, how do you feel that has, how does that sort of manifest in the space of this film? Like the experience in journalism, the experience in, being in DC and being around music and writing in these different contexts. How do you think that has, because I can see elements, in this. So
I got, I guess the kernel of this idea before I'd even read the novel that I adapted, Erasure, I wrote this article in 2014, the year that I left journalism. I wrote an article called The Racism Beat, and it was about how I'd reached this point in my journalism career when it felt like on a weekly basis, people were coming to me and asking me to write about, the latest tragedy that has befallen a black person. So it'd be like, do you want to write about Breonna Taylor being killed? Do you want to write about Mike Brown being killed? Do you want to write about X unarmed person being killed? Do you want to write about somebody saying a racist thing about Barack Obama? And it just started to feel like my job had become this revolving door of misery. It just felt like that's the expectation, is that I'm supposed to come in and just talk about the latest tragedy. And it started to feel like, A, it's sort of like emotionally draining, but then B, it was like, what can I write about this that I didn't write about before, right? Like, what can I say about this black teenager being killed that I didn't write about the other black teenager being killed, right? Like, it just starts to feel like there's this, just sort of like the same, like, what can I write about it that Frederick Douglass didn't write about hundreds of years ago? You know, these are sort of like cyclical things, right? And it just feels like I don't want to do this anymore. And so when I went to film and television, I was like ecstatic, because it's like, great, now I'm in the world of fiction. Reality doesn't matter. We're not beholden to any sort of like truths in the world. We can write about black people on Mars. We can write about black people traveling through the underworld. It doesn't matter. And it wasn't long before somebody was coming to me and saying, do you want to write this movie about a black teenager being killed by the police? Do you want to write this movie about slaves? Do you want to write this movie about inner city violence? And it felt like, oh, even here, even in the world of fiction and fantasy, where we don't have to talk about anything that's going on in our present world, there's still just such a limited view as to what black life looks like and what black story. 3 months before I found this novel, I sent in a script to an executive, and I got back a note that I needed to make the lead character blacker. That sort of was an actual note, and it came through an emissary, of course. And I said, it came through my manager, and I told my manager, like, I will indulge this note if whomever gave it to you will sit across from me and tell me what it means to be blacker. Tell me how I can make somebody blacker, and I will actually consider this note. And that no went away, of course, because I think they knew that they were setting themselves up for a civil rights lawsuit. And so it was like, okay, you know what? Let's forget about that one. And so, but it started. So these were conversations that I was having with my friends for, when I was still in journalism. And then these were conversations that I was having with my friends and with myself once I started in film and TV. And so when I found this novel in 2020, it was kind of like, oh my God, this is, these are all the conversations that I've been having for the past 20 years. I didn't know that they were encapsulated in this novel. And so when I read the book, it just, that wasn't just those things that sort of like felt close to me. I also have two siblings, the way that Monk has two siblings. We have our own push and pull dynamics sometimes. My mother didn't die of cancer, but my mother didn't die of Alzheimer's, but she died of cancer. And I actually moved back here for a period of time toward the end of her life to help take care of her. So there was a lot of overlap in Monk's life and my life, and it just felt like when I was reading that novel, it just felt, it honestly felt like my entire life had led up to sort of this book in some way. And it just felt like I'd never felt closer to a piece of art. I never felt like a piece of art had resonated with me deeper than that book.
So, in thinking about the book, because I mean, the book's really different from the movie, and so this process of adaptation. So when you read the book and you were feeling, this sort of resonance with Monk, with these thoughts and conversations about race and some of the family parts that you were just explaining, sort of overlap for you. What then was sort of the process of like, okay, I love this book, I want to adapt it. Walk us through sort of that part. And I'm also interested in, did you connect with Percival Everett, the author, and how has that been for him?
Percival's become a pretty good friend, actually. I just had lunch with him last week. So the first thing I did was reach out to Percival, and I asked him for the rights, and all he asked was for a half an hour phone conversation with me. So we jumped on the phone, and he asked me why I was interested in the book. He asked me who I was thinking of casting. He asked me sort of the tone that I was going for, just kind of kicking the tires and making sure that I wasn't going to ruin his novel. And we got off the phone, and he agreed to give me the rights for free for 6 months after that conversation. He said, go write a script, and if anything comes of it, then you can pay me back then. And that is, that it is pretty unheard of. Sometimes the rights process can take months, if not years. And he just gave them to me, and he said, I think you understand the spirit of the novel, and you understand the essence of what I'm trying to do. So he gave me the rights, and then before he gave me the rights, the real terrifying moment was he asked to read the script. Once I'd written the script, he said, I want to read the script before I'll actually sign the contract. And so that was like a terrifying 48 hours waiting for him to finish it. And then he gave me the rights. And then I showed him the film when we had an early cut. And that was another terrifying screening. That was probably the most terrifying screening. Do you know how do you know when you like show somebody something that you really like and you don't look at it, you just look at your friend to see if they like it.
Watching their reaction.
To see if their face is enjoying what you really enjoy. That's how it was the entire time. It was just me staring at him like a psychopath. But, you know, I think it's the best way that I think you can go about a relationship and an adaptation, in that he had no creative input. But he was incredibly supportive all along the way, which is to me the perfect balance of what you want. Yeah. And he's since been, he and I are talking about writing a movie together, actually. He's big into Westerns, and I want to write a Western. So we're talking about.
You're from Tucson. Of course you're going to write a Western. So in thinking about the characters, and especially, you know, it's not, so I feel in many ways like this is a writer's film. And I say that in the spirit of like, you know, it's about a writer. It's about these different kinds of writing. It's about the literary industry. It's about the adaptation. There's a meta layer of adaptation within the film, which is an adaptation, right? So thinking about all these different ways that writing is happening and being talked about or thought about in the context of the film, I think is also a really great piece of it that sort of goes beyond some of the thematic aspects in regard to family and relationships. But I also think that one of the things for me about this film that's so lovely is that while you're critiquing some of these shortcomings in the industries, whether it's publishing or film, et cetera, it's also very much you writing a film about Black folks that's outside of these norms or these spaces, right? And so I wonder if you could speak a little bit about your process of bringing like the women characters to life, the gay brother, like things like that. I think there's a different tone around gender and sexuality and identity, women characters, and even masculinity in the context of Monk as a person. I wonder how much of that, you know, was sort of came along as just organically emerging in the process, or how much of that you sort of thought about and mapped out in an intentional way.
A lot of it is just organic. I think that the writing so I'd written for TV for 6 years by the time I found this book, and I'm really happy that I'd written for TV, because I think that one of the reasons why I love watching and writing television is that television, sort of like the amount of time that you spend with these characters, really allows you to get deep and layered and nuanced with these portrayals of human beings. I think that that's why you have, you know, I think that's why the shows like The Office persist, right? It's like because there's so many episodes, and you really start to feel like these people are your friends. Like you really start to understand them in like a very deep way, and like you've grown with them, right? Like you've seen them fall in love and have children. And there's something sort of personal and intimate about that I like. And so I think that sometimes a lot of that character stuff gets thrown to the wayside for film, because you got a plot that you need to get through, and you don't have a lot of money, and you need to wrap it up in 90 minutes. And so I think that sometimes that character stuff gets neglected. And to me, I just never wanted to neglect these people as like layered, nuanced, complex human beings in favor of like just pushing the story forward as quickly as possible. And I think that, you know, that's people talk to me about the cast and like, what an incredible cast. How'd you get this cast? And it's like, and the thing that I say is like, look at what happens when you write real characters for Black actors, you know, like look at what happens when they're not just a slave, or they're not just like somebody who comes out and says like expository dialogue and then they die or they disappear for the rest of the film. It's like, you know, that was the thing that was important to me was, you know, maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but there was a number of people who tried to get me to cut the Lorraine and Maynard stuff. And yeah, I know. right? It's crazy. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And but they were, the thing was like, does it really matter? Like, it doesn't drive the plot forward. Like it's going to be an extra day. It's going to be expensive. And to me, like one of the points of the movie is that I know that in most movies, Lorraine and Maynard would get thrown by the wayside.
Right.
In most movies, you wouldn't care about them.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what happens to them. And I think that to me, I didn't want to make a movie that was just like, yeah, you guys are just here to say some exposition and then you're gone. It's like, no, let's like give these people real characters and real lived in human beings to play. And so, yeah, that to me was just always, and I'm basically Monk and Cliff. That is like, I'm sort of like, those are sort of like so much of me in those characters. And I think that you brought up masculinity and sexuality, I am from Tucson, but I live in LA now, so I'm going to talk about therapy. I'm sorry. That's what happens.
Don't
Once you move to LA,
apologize.
you have to talk about therapy.
Pro therapy.
But I had a therapist this one time who said this thing to me that I found pretty profound, and I think about it all the time now. And I used to have anger management issues, and she said to me, anger is a secondary emotion. She said, beneath anger always, particularly for men, is either pain or fear. And men are not socialized to be able to say, I feel afraid right now, or you hurt my feelings. I used to, saying to somebody, you hurt my feelings, would have been impossible to me 10 years ago, because I felt like that's not manly. You don't say that. You sort of walk around stoic and with a stiff upper lip and move on. And to me, one of the themes of this film is what people do and the strange things that human beings do when they do not feel free to be themselves and they do not feel free to live fully the way that they want to live. And so to me, Cliff and Monk are sort of like both struggling with similar things there. It's like they both isolated themselves and built a facade in front of themselves for different reasons, but it sort of resulted in the same thing. And now Cliff is sort of like unburdening himself of all that and sort of like saying like, screw this, I'm going to live out loud and be who I want to be. And Monk's still sort of like, that's one of the reasons why I think Monk dislikes Cliff. Yes. Is because Monk
Cliff is freer.
Yeah, it's because he's freer and he's sort of like free to be who he wants to be. And I think Monk gets frustrated by that. And so to me, that's a sort of like one of the themes of the film. And I think that it happens to a lot of men. I think a lot of men are afraid to be who they are and talk about, I certainly was for a very long time. And so the other important aspect with the female characters in the film is that I think a lot of, when I was going through my stuff, when I was still going through my shit, it was largely women in my life who helped me through that. It was largely women in my life who tolerated me and who helped me try to be a better person, because they sort of like actually spent time with me and talked to me, and I actually felt like I could open up to them. So I think that it's no surprise to me that in this film, it's like, Lisa takes it upon herself to like break the ice with Monk in the car at the beginning, right? Because she sees that he's not going to do it. Yeah. And so she takes it upon herself to say, like, this is my responsibility to make my brother laugh, because otherwise he's not going to do it. And then, Coraline takes it upon herself to sort of like really tell Monk the truth for the first time and sort of really lay bare like the problems that exist in his life and sort of stand up to him in a way that other people don't. Centaura is sort of like, I really like that scene between Monk and Centaura because it's sort of Monk realizes like, oh, this person that I thought was stupid and simplistic is actually smarter than I thought, and all of a sudden the tables are turned and I feel like I'm on the back foot. So that was an important dynamic for me too, is just to acknowledge that, a lot of the time I think sort of women see through the facade of the sort of the masculine facade that we try to build up. And I think that, my life has been the better for it in those instances.
Thank you so much for sharing in some of that very like personal piece. It makes me think a lot about the feminist Audre Lorde. She talks about anger and she says, anger is loaded with energy and information. And I think thinking about what you said, that oftentimes below the anger, there's other things, there's root or primary causes, and to kind of be able to see that play out a bit and explore that in this context of the film is really great. I love that, and I think a lot of times, we don't get that often.
Yeah, and I think that's it's lovable grump is hard. It's a hard character to play, because if you err too far to the side of grump, you lose the audience. Like, people stop rooting for that person. Yes. It's like, screw you, you're a jerk. I don't care what you have to say. Like, you brought it upon yourself. And I think the thing that Jeffrey did so well in the film, without me even telling him, is like, the reason you don't hate him is because you see the sort of like anguish that's beneath his sort of like facade. You see that sort of like, because he's like arguing with everybody from the beginning of the movie. He's arguing with his students. He's arguing with his colleagues. He's arguing with his family.
Bookstore.
Exactly. Like, he's arguing with everybody. And but I sort of, the way that he buys it back is Jeffrey plays it in the way that allows you to see the sort of like pain that's just beneath the surface. And you realize, like, he's mad because his books aren't successful. He's mad because his father killed himself. He's mad because his mother is slowly sort of losing her mind. He's mad because he's alienated himself from his family. He's mad because his sister's dead. Like, there's all these sort of like painful moments in his life that are fomenting to cause this, to cause him to lash out in this way. And so Jeffrey, I think, plays that really well and allows you to see beneath that in a way that allows you to not lose the audience entirely.
And so, in terms of course, we have great actors, and it's great. It's a great script, and I'm so glad that you did not cut Maynard and Lorraine. And it's so beautiful because there's also this important piece where she brings Cliff back in, and he's about to just like, get out, Cliff. You're embarrassing everybody. You're embarrassing yourself. And she says, no, like, we're gonna work this out. We're gonna sort it out. And even though there are pieces that are sort of left undone around, the mom and some unresolved things with Coraline, it's still, gives us something to continue to think about and talk about. And so I just, final question about the film. I think in terms of when Monk is first writing, we have the one scene where the characters are there with him as he's thinking it through and, writing this very beginning of the story. And tell us a little bit about the process wherein you decided to do that scene or script it in that particular way.
Yeah, so if you haven't read Erasure, like, the Percival loves being sort of like meta and metatextual and experimental and adventurous in his writing. And so the entirety of My Pathology is published in Erasure. So like 110 pages of Erasure are dedicated to this novella that Monk writes called My Pathology. It's like 11 chapters. And so you're reading this novel, and then all of a sudden you're reading a totally different novel that the character had written. And you really understand the sort of like depths of depravity that the novel's crazy. It's really crazy. And it really causes you to lean forward. You're with it for 110 pages. So you really sort of like lean forward in your seat and like take note of what it is. And it's insane. And so I knew that I didn't want to do, I like hate the scenes in movies when it's like a writing scene and the writer's like pounding on the keyboard all aggressively, and then they stop and take some coffee, and then they pound more. And it felt like, that's not writing. To me, is very painful. I hate it. It's a terrible profession that I've made for myself, but it is incredibly slow and painstaking and methodical, and I'm never like sitting there pounding on the keyboards. It's sort of like sitting back and thinking, like, is this the right word? Is this? And so I wanted to write what actually writing felt like to me, but B, I knew that we needed to do something that I also didn't want to just show words coming up on a computer screen. So boring, and like, you don't get anything from it. And so I was like, well, what's something we can do that's cinematic, that feels like it's going to cause people to lean forward in their seats the way that I leaned forward in my seat when I was reading the book. And initially and so I was like, okay, maybe the characters manifest in front of him. And so initially that scene, when I wrote it, was going to be, we were going to cut, and Monk was going to be in an alleyway. He was going to be sort of at his desk in an alley, and then it was going to play out in front of him in this darkened alley. and we didn't have alley money, so could not
Still
afford
gotta
an
light
alley.
the alley.
Yeah. And so it was like, well, next best thing. Why don't we try to do it in the study? And so we set it there, and then we also, in the initial conception of the script, there was a bunch of flashbacks, and I was excited because I was like, I want Keith David to play the father in the flashbacks. And then when we cut all the flashbacks, I was like, well, there goes Keith David. And then when we were thinking of that scene, I was like, do you think Keith David would do this? And I was like, it's such a tiny part. And they were like, talk to him. And so I called Keith David. Keith David he goes, I called him and he goes, hello? Hello? And I was like, Keith, it's Cord. I wrote American Fiction. I'd love to talk to you. And he goes, I'm just kidding. This is my answering machine. He has one of those. He has one of those. It's crazy. I could not believe it. Like, it's crazy. And I left him a message. And then he called me back like 10 minutes later, and he talked to me about the part, and he said, I think I get it. Let's do it. And so he showed up, and then Oak showed up with Oak was in Hamilton. Oak played Hercules in Hamilton. He was just coming off of Broadway, and he's a wonderful actor. And he showed up in an eye patch. He'd actually scratched his cornea. And he was like, do you mind if I wear this eye patch? And I was like, do I mind if you wear the eye patch? I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't think of the eye patch. Of course you can. And I think that scene is, I think, a really good example of the ways in which actors can change what you think is a scene when you write it. Because when I wrote that scene, I was like, this is going to be cartoonish. It's ridiculous. The first line that he says in that soliloquy is, I hates this man, I hates my mama, and I hates myself. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Who's going to be able to say that? And then I got there, and we were rehearsing, and it was like, we didn't really rehearse because we didn't have much money or time, but that was a scene where it was like, we were going to be handheld camera and moving around a lot, and so we started rehearsing that and the blocking and everything. And the moment that those guys started performing it, it was like, oh, this is what it should be. It shouldn't be ridiculous. Like what I like about that scene is all of a sudden they're such fantastic actors that they were able to take this dialogue that I thought was cartoonish and all of a sudden make it seem like, is this good? Like, is this actually good? And I think that helped the story in the long run because I realized, like, no, it should be, you should leave that feeling like maybe that was good because then that helps you buy the idea that the book becomes a huge hit.
Yes, and the conversation they're having later when they're debating it, the critics and whatnot.
Exactly. It helps you sort of like, and it's also like, you know, that scene is very much about a young man who feels neglected by his father and sort of like dealing with the issues that he has with his father. And like, you know, Monk obviously very clearly has issues with his own father. And so I think that what I like about that also is it gives, you know, it sort of like makes the idea that Monk is just writing something that he thinks is tossing off something stupid. It sort of like belies the notion that he's just trying to write just a book that he thinks to be ridiculous. And so that was one that I felt totally blindsided by with how they performed it. And then as soon as I saw it, I was like, yeah, this is what it should have been all along.
Thanks so much. So I could ask a billion questions, but I know the audience has some questions, I'm sure. So we will open it up, I think. Okay. Raise your hand, and Jeff will get to you with the mic.
Could I start with one quick question?
Yes, sir.
So there's a specific moment in the film that clearly plays to Tucson audiences in a way that would not play to audiences in the same way anywhere else in the world.
Okay.
So as a Tucsonan, how did you decide what Tucson reference to deploy in the film? It's very specific and
yeah. I mean, so I was like, what's Cliff's problem with Tucson? And I was thinking about it, and I was like, Cliff is a gay man in Tucson, a newly out man in Tucson. What is his issue going to be? And it's like, yeah, it's only IBTs. You know, that's like that has to be his issue. I feel like Cliff is He's a plastic surgeon. He's wealthy. He's middle-aged. He's probably looking for a different kind of gay bar. And he's stuck going to IBTs where everybody says that he looks like Tyler Perry. And I was like, that to me was that's one that, like, if you're from Tucson, you know. You know. There was actually a person on the crew whose girlfriend was living in Tucson, and he told me that he called her, and he was like, is it true that there's only one gay bar? And she was like, yeah, IBTs.
But there's also the bands, the book titles.
Oh, yeah. So the book titles, yes. Oh, those are what you're talking about. Yeah. So all of the fake book titles, Car Full of Bosnians, Scathe, Four Alarm Fire, those were all of my friends' bands from high school. And so Car Full of Bosnians was actually 4 Bosnians in a Bosnian punk band. You can Google them. My favorite song is Heavy Metla, if you find it online. It's a fantastic track. And I still talk to all of those guys every day. We're on a big Tucson guy group chat and they just made Omer Cresso, who is the sort of lead. Yeah? Oh, yeah, all right. Omer's the homie. Shout out Omer. Omer Cresso just recently made a bunch of Car Full of Bosnians t-shirts for us. So
Yes.
I just got my new Car Full of Bosnians t-shirt in the mail.
Well, thank you for doing that. Tucson's thought those were the best Easter eggs they had gotten all year.
Thank you. Oh,
Yes.
I'm glad to.
Awesome. Hey, the movie was freaking awesome. I loved it.
you.
I wanted to give you this real quick. I am an actor. My name is Michael Ray.
Nice to meet you, Michael Ray.
Nice to meet you, too. I'm going to be on HBO next month
I
with
see that. You're in the
Robert
Sympathizer?
Downey Jr. Yes, sir.
That's
and I'm going to
awesome.
be on Netflix, too.
That's awesome.
I wanted to ask you about the casting of it. It was freaking awesome, awesome actors in there. And I'm wondering what you look for. Like, say, if I was thrown in for your next movie. By the way, I wrote a script of a Western, a one-legged guy, just in case. I put my phone number on the picture. You know what I'm saying. But no, seriously, what do you look for when it comes to casting?
That's a great question. I think that for me, so I frequently think of like, so for this movie, I think it changes for every movie, right? For everything you're working on. But for this movie in particular, I knew I wanted Jeffrey Wright from day one. I sort of have been in love with his work since I was a kid, and he's the only person that I had in mind. When they were, when you write a script and send it out, every agency in LA starts sending you names of actors that they think should be in it, and they would, people were sending me Jamie Foxx and Will Smith and Denzel Washington, and movie stars. They want movie stars. Everybody's like, well, it should be a movie star, and it's like, and I was just like, absolutely not. It needs to be Jeffrey Wright. It's just Jeffrey. It is Jeffrey Wright. And once I cast Jeffrey, once he agreed to do it, then it was sort of about populating the people around Jeffrey. So going back to the sort of like lovable grump thing, I think that one of the ways that you also sort of convince an audience to like a guy is to surround him with people who love him, who are easy for the audience to love, right? And so all of a sudden it's like, get somebody as charismatic as Tracy Ellis Ross and Eric Alexander and Sterling K. Brown, who you're like, yeah, these people, I love these people. And then you see those people love this guy, and you're kind of like, okay. It's kind of like when one of your really close friends brings around a new friend, and you're not sure about the new friend, but you're like, well, whatever. Paul likes him. All right, fine. I'll let him in. And I think that is like, that's sort of like the chemistry of what I was going for. And so actually, I didn't even watch. Well, I grew up watching Eric Alexander on Living Single. It's this sitcom that I loved when I was a kid, and I was obsessed with her. So I knew she was going to be great. But I actually hadn't seen. I never watched This Is Us, so I didn't really see Sterling's work on that show. But I went and watched him on talk shows. So I didn't even really watch his acting. I went and just watched him interacting with people in real life. And I was like, this guy just has such a buoyancy and an effervescence, and I want to spend time with him and like hang out with him, and it felt like this is the kind of guy that you want to counteract that kind of like prickly energy that Jeffrey has. And Tracy Ellis Ross, same thing. It's like she's just she's just a delight and sort of like sunshine. And so it felt like, yeah, this is the kind of person that we need to break through that sort of like wall when this brother and sister are sitting in the car for the first time in a long time. And so I just think that sometimes it's, sometimes you're looking for a chameleon, I think Jeffrey Wright, for instance, is like a chameleon. I think that he can play a number of different parts and just sort of like be a number of different things, and we've seen his range. And then I think some people, you're not necessarily looking for a chameleon, you're looking for like, what's the energy that this person just has naturally? Like what do they just bring to the table just through their basic humanity, and then can they find the character in there? So it varies, but that's what I looked for in this film.
I'm represented by Fergus Maher.
All right, brother. All right.
Thank you so much.
No, of course. Thank you.
We have a question over here. Could you do me a favor? Could you switch mics? There's a little bit of like a garble.
Going
on
in and
your-
out?
Do you want me to
Yes, and I don't think it's your voice. I think it's the mic.
Okay. Try this one.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Here's a question right here.
Hi, Mr. Jefferson. My name is Karina Alvarez, and I'm
Hi.
actually a high schooler. I'm going to LA for college in the fall, and
Amazing.
I'm actually going to be majoring in screenwriting.
Incredible.
And I wanted to ask, I'm just like you. I grew up here in Tucson, where I'm from. Not a lot of people are artists. My parents are both educators. So I'm kind of just, shot in the dark going to college in LA. And
Awesome.
I want to know if you have any tips on how to navigate, like, your identity and, how my race and my gender, just all of that, going into the industry, that there's not a lot of people that look like me.
Yeah. Firstly, congratulations. I would say that, I would say that you're doing the first thing that you're doing is great. It's like you're following your dream, That's a hard thing to do. That's something a lot of people do not do. And I think that you should be commended for even doing that in the first place, especially going to a place where you don't know anybody and you're just sort of like following your heart. That's brave. So kudos to you for that. And then secondly, I think that something that I wish, I'm 42 and I made my first movie, and I think that one of the and I really regret not doing it earlier. And I think that one of the reasons why I didn't do it earlier was because I, like I said earlier, is that I felt like that's not for me. Like, I'm not an artist. And so I think that something that it also seems like you're ahead of the curve on is like, you believe that you have a story that deserves to be told. And that is also hard for people to understand. And so believing that you have a story that deserves to be told, believing that you have a voice that people want to listen to, that's another sort of like thing that it's an obstacle that you've surmounted before I even did that. And then I think the key is just to stay true to who you are and the stories that you want to tell. I think that, something that I tell everybody is just the number one thing that you need to have if you want to be an artist is resilience. That's just, you're going to get told no over and over and over and over again. And I think that it's something else to keep in mind in the face of sort of like all that rejection is that is like, think to yourself, like, what if you never make it? Like, whatever making it is. I said this earlier, so forgive me if I've said this already to you today. If you were at the University of Arizona and now you're here, you've heard this before. But I think that Carl Weathers is an actor who died recently, right? Yes, give it up for Carl Weathers. He's amazing. And after he passed, I was watching an interview with him on YouTube, and he said this thing where he said people frequently ask me, like, how do I become an actor? And I tell them, like, you can become an actor if you want to become an actor. You can work at it and go study acting with a great teacher. And like, if you just really keep at it, you will probably eventually become a working actor. And he said, the problem is that when people ask that, normally what they're asking is, how do I become a movie star? And he was like, and that's a different thing. Like, if you want to be an actor, you can be an actor. If you want to be a movie star, I don't know what to tell you. And so the thing to keep in mind is that when you're starting in all of this, you need to find value in the making of the work. You can't, because if all you're finding value in is one day I'm going to be rich and famous, then you're going to be incredibly disappointed. Even if you become rich and famous, it's going to feel hollow. I promise you. It's going to feel like, who cares? And so the key is to remember is like I went years ago, I went and read about like Edgar Allan Poe died in a gutter. You know, nobody knows how he died actually. He just ended up brutalized in a gutter and he died. Not famous. Franz Kafka died when he was 40. I think when he died, he was an insurance adjuster. Vincent van Gogh died penniless. Like there is, but they weren't making art to be famous. They were making art because it's what they did. It's what they believed in the value of making something, and it's what they had to do. And so when I had my day job, I would come home and write, not because I felt like I was going to be rich and famous, but it's just because I felt like it was something that I had to do. It just sort of like keeps me sane. And so I think that when you're setting out on this path, just find value in the making of stuff. You need to find sort of that worthwhile. Because if you set out to do it because one day I'm going to be rich and I'm going to win awards, do not do this. And so I would say just you're following your heart, you're following your dream. You already believe in yourself as an artist. You believe that you have something that's worth saying. You're already on the right track. I would say that you just got to keep at it. You just have to keep at it, even and especially when people tell you no, because they're going to tell you no all the time. But yeah, I'm rooting for you. I'm very happy for you. Yeah.
We have a question back here.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm so glad that you did not kill Lorraine. I just wanted a hug from her so bad. She was give the best hugs. I really loved in the film that you hit on so many media tropes around Black people and how we're portrayed in the media. And as a Black person watching this film, it was interesting to hear laughter at interesting parts that are very real for Black folks. And so I'm wondering, I'm sure you've seen the film with various audiences. What is the overarching takeaway that you would want diverse audiences to get from this film? Because it's not just, literary. It's not just, what the publishing industry is about. I'm in that field.
Yeah.
I know what that is. But there's definitely an undercurrent that I think as Black people we get, but maybe not everyone gets.
Yeah. That's interesting. I when people ask me what I want people to take away from this movie, I just say a smile. I think that I sort of intentionally avoided spoon feeding anybody any lessons in this movie. I think that I wanted to make a movie that's like, look, there's no right answers to any of this. I think that to me race is a subject that's like perfect for comedy. And I think that that's because race is both real and not real, right? So the vast majority of scientists will tell you that the idea of racial differences, that our humanity is different based on the color of our skin or the texture of our hair or the width of our nose, is not real, that it's sort of like we're actually far more similar than we are different, and that there's no meaning to any of that quote-unquote racial difference. That being said, we've structured our institutions and our societies in a way that suggests race is real. So race is not real and insignificant, and yet racism is real and like sometimes fatally important, right? And so to me, that inherent tension between those two things is ripe for comedy. And so I just wanted to sort of invite people to come in and laugh at the absurdity of this stuff. And so to me, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying about sort of like people laughing at specific things, but I made the movie to be funny. I put jokes in the movie for a reason, because I wanted people to laugh and enjoy themselves, and I wanted people to laugh at the absurdity of all this. So that never stressed me out. I had somebody once who said, asked very specifically, like, how do you feel about when you see white people laughing at Monk being shot in the end of the film? Does that make you feel bad? And I said, well, firstly, I don't think that white people are laughing at Monk being shot. I think they're laughing. It's like sort of a joke. Some jokes are the ones where like the punchline, and that's the fun part of the joke, is like you it takes like 5 minutes to get to the punchline and you see it coming. And so then sort of like it's a pressure release when it happens. And so when people are laughing at that, they're not laughing at Monk being killed. They're laughing because they know that when we cut back to the producer, he's going to say like, that's perfect. That's a great ending, right? Like that to me is what people are laughing at. But even beyond that, the thing that I asked this person is would it be better to use that imagery to make white people cry? Would it be better to use that imagery to make white people feel pity for a character? Why is it better to use imagery of black trauma and black tragedy? Why is that better, and why is that okay to make white people feel sorry, but not okay to use that imagery to make people laugh? And I don't think that it is better. I think that some people think it is, but I disagree with that. And I think that for me, the sort of like fakeness and sort of like simultaneous realness of race is, it just sort of like, it makes us all try to sort of like make sense of it and make it true somehow. And I think that so much of our life is spent being like, well, this has to be real, right? Like it's got such important consequences. How do we, it just feels like we're all in the dark, like playing pin the tail on the donkey, trying to make it real, and like we're poking each other. And so to me, it's, I understand what you're saying, but I think one of the reasons why we're so polarized right now in the world, not just in America, but in the world, is because we've lost the ability to talk to one another. And we've lost the ability to talk to people who feel differently than we do. And that to me, we've all, and I'm guilty of that as well. I sort of like live in my own ideological bubble in Los Angeles, where I live around people who believe like I believe and sort of like vote the way that I vote and shop at the stores that I shop at. And we're sort of like aligned religiously, like it's just, I have found my safe space that sort of like, I don't really go outside of it that much. And so to me, one of the things that's beautiful about our culture and cultural institutions like cinemas, like concert halls, like museums, like art galleries, like these are some of the last places on earth, or at least in America, where you come in and you're just like around people who are very different from you. And you sort of like can come in and sort of experience something with people who are strangers, who may not agree with everything that you agree with. And I think that to me is like, that's what's great about the theater experience. That's what's great to me about watching a movie like this when people are going to have differences of opinion, is like to be around that, to feel that energy. I think that we need to start treating the cinema experience like, I think, live music. I think that sort of like in the same way you can listen to a record at home, of course, there's something different about going to see the band around a bunch of different people and sort of like experiencing what's going on in that room. And so to me, a movie like this, where maybe it is a little challenging, maybe people do have differences of opinion, but that to me is like what makes the experience rich. I like being in that room and feeling that energy and feeling people's different perspectives and feeling what people laugh at and don't laugh at. I like that. And so, to me, I made this movie to be discussed. I made this movie for people to laugh when they want to laugh and cry when they want to cry and leave and think about it. So, I'm just happy if people see it, if they laugh. I'm all about them laughing. I think that is, it's an experience that we don't have enough these days. So I'm just honored if anybody comes at all.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions, and there was one here.
Jeff, make sure you get some people from the back.
Yeah, it's been very heavy up front. This is not your fault, sir, but we see you back there.
Hi, Cord. I wanted to say thank you, first of all, for coming back and visiting your hometown again.
No, please. Thank you.
You touched on something very personal. You talked about masculinity and going to therapy. And as somebody who grew up here in Tucson with parents who had to go through a lot, lived in Mexico for a couple years, and I was trying to deal with the possibility that my parents might not ever really become citizens here. I used to visualize a lot of, I don't know, I used to visualize a lot of movies and characters and maybe like scenarios where I was saving my brother, and keeping him safe. And I was never very good at writing. It was always the visual aspect of something, the feeling of sharing emotions just visually.
Yeah.
And you talked about therapy, and I wonder if the more you've been able to open up your cognitive framework, have you noticed that it's become easier for you to write characters? Has it, raised the bar in terms of, has the threshold increased now that you know more about the complexities as a man, where now you're like, oh, I can actually talk about these emotions. I can actually share what it is like, rather than being told to just shut up, man up.
Hell yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is one of the greatest gifts that's come to me from therapy. It's also helped me emotionally. Not at all, doesn't all have to be about my professional life, but it has made my work better. It really has. I think that it is, when your job is to reflect the human experience in words, the more that you dissect your own experience and sift through the details of your own life, the better you're going to be at sort of like explaining people and sort of like understanding people's motivations. And the thing about it is that you start to realize, like, there's this damn it. Do you know Occam's razor? You familiar with that? So there's another one that I'm blanking on, but something razor. Hanlon's razor. Yes, my man. Well done. Hanlon's razor is the Hanlon's razor says that never ascribe to malice what could more accurately be ascribed to ignorance or stupidity, right? And to me, that is the best way to approach writing characters ever, which is that very rarely does somebody wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to do bad stuff today. Almost never, right? The vast majority of people wake up every day and they say, I'm going to do right in the world today. And then frequently their right comes into conflict with my right. And sort of like we watch that play out over and over and over again. And so to me, having a better understanding of myself and having a better understanding of like being able to love myself despite my flaws, despite the fact that I've done bad things to people, despite the fact that I've made huge mistakes in my life, being able to love myself despite those things and sort of like understand maybe why I did those things that I didn't understand at the time that I was doing them. All of that stuff helps me navigate writing and navigate humanity and navigate. And like, to me, I don't like mustache twirly villains who are like, I'm just going to blow up the world just because, who cares? Like, to me, I'm far more interested in like villains who have a valid reason for being angry, who have sort of like valid arguments, and sort of like all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, maybe are they right? Am I agreeing with the bad guy? Is there a bad guy? Who's the actual bad guy, right? Like, that to me is, I want to go to stuff and be challenged. And I think that really navigating your own interiority and figuring out who you are is sort of always helps to write more challenging work, because you're challenging yourself and you're challenging you're just understanding human beings on a more molecular level. And so I would, do it to get your head straight. I just think that I think therapy should be free in this country. I really do. Like, I think that if everybody got free therapy, then we would see a lot of changes really drastically, very quickly. And so obviously do it just for your own health, but I really do think that it has helped my work immeasurably. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. People are more than their worst deed. Exactly.
We have a question here in the almost.
Yeah. All right.
I think you might have answered this anyway, but I feel compelled to ask it from a side angle because I really liked the question about, people laughing at different parts.
Yeah.
I really, and I will get emotional and not apologize for it, but
Great. And do not.
the character of Cliff meant so much to me as a person who didn't discover their queerness until I was 46. And, this is the third time I've watched this movie in the theater. And each time the mom says to Cliff, always knew you weren't a queer. And people laugh. I wonder why people are laughing. But you saying that we're laughing at the absurdity or the heartbreak of it has shifted my thinking a little bit. But I want to thank you for then the scene on the porch, talking about his dad, wanting him to know who he really was. I guess my question is, this is not going to maybe be a question you can answer, but how did you put all of these things in a movie that can touch so many people?
Yeah, okay. I can answer that. I can try. I would say firstly something else that I would say is that particularly when it pertains to the scene and that you're talking about is that I think another reason that people forget why people laugh, and at least this was for me, is sometimes people laugh because they're nervous, because they feel uncomfortable. I did that a lot, and trust me, it pissed my parents off to no end. There's nothing that you can do to irritate your parents more than laughing when they're scolding you. I did it all the time, but that's what I did when I was uncomfortable. And so I would also sort of like say that sometimes I think people laugh because they're uncomfortable. Somebody said something that's very uncomfortable. But secondly, that scene on the porch, again, there's just so much of me in this, and that's the speech that I wish somebody had given me before my mother died. I'm not gay. I've never hid my sexuality, but after my mother died, I sort of really thought about it and took stock of my life, and I realized that there was a lot about me that my mother didn't know, and she would never know that now because I sort of, I hid stupid stuff. Like I'm covered in tattoos. My mom didn't know that I had tattoos until like 2 months before she died, because I thought that somehow it would feel like I disappointed her in some way, that in some way that she would think less of me. And the thing that happened after she died is when I really thought about it, it's like she wouldn't have cared at all. She loved me unconditionally. And it really made me feel so sad that she would never know me fully now. And so that's just taken directly from my life. That's just me. And I think that what I really try to tap into is that I think that I don't know if I sort of like set out to do it intentionally, but I just feel like I was raised in a very weird household where my father's here and he's asleep. I'm looking at him right now. He's asleep. I'm looking at him right now. He's sleeping. No, but I was raised in a weird household where my father's a black Republican. My mother was a white liberal. I grew up in this household where nothing was taken for granted, where there was constant debate and discussion. And it sort of goes back to what I was saying earlier, though, about like, I really appreciate being raised in a house like that because it allowed me to see that like neither side has monsters on it, Like certainly there's probably bad actors on both sides of the thing, but there's also people who are just sort of disagree and think differently, and that's okay. And you can speak civilly to them, and you can fall in love with them, and you can have relationships with them. And so to me, I think that I was just raised, and another thing is that my mother was disowned when she married my father. I never met my grandparents. I would send my grandparents letters when I was a kid, and they would return them unopened. And they, when my mother married my father, they told her, if you marry a black man, you're dead to us. And they said, we don't want to see you anymore. And So my mother would tell me, she would say to me sometimes, she said I actually tried to think of anything that you could do that would make me stop loving you. And she said, I thought about you murdering people and being like just like a maniac killer. And she said, and even then I couldn't imagine not speaking to you. And so I grew up really early on with this sort of like foundational understanding that just people are just people. And that sort of like we all just sort of, yes, we're different in many ways, but we're mostly similar, like I was saying earlier. And so I feel very lucky that I was able to see that from a young age. And I think that it really helped me shape the work that I want to make. I'm increasingly just only interested in making work that feels like it's unifying. I think that at one point I thought that like politicians would do that, but increasingly I feel like we live in a world in which politicians are just leveraging our differences and sort of like using it to drive even bigger wedges between us. And so I increasingly just feel like it's up to artists to try to sort of bring people together. I think that that's sort of like one of the last places that we can find unifying bonds. And so it means a lot to me that you said that, though. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for seeing the film again.
There's a question here in the middle of the almost balcony.
Great.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Jesse Bravo, and one of the questions
Jesse Bravo, that's a name. Wow. Love it.
One of the questions I have is, during the creative process of this film, what is one of your main challenges, and how did you overcome it?
It's a good question. I think that for me, I would say the main challenge was that I had never directed anything before this. I never directed a short film. I never directed anything. And so I was coming into it just literally not knowing anything. Obviously, I'd been on set before, but like as I was there in the capacity of a writer on TV shows that I was working on. And so I was really scared and intimidated. And I thought for a while about how I was going to deal with that. And then one day I was just like, just be honest about it. And so, well, really what changed it was I had a friend who had just directed his first feature, and I asked him, what's a piece of advice that you could give me? And he said, every day that you go to set, try to be as happy as possible. Because if you go to set and you're miserable and you're yelling and you're throwing things, everybody's going to start doing that because it goes from the top down. And so if you go to set and you're a jerk, everybody's going to start being a jerk, and it's going to be a miserable experience for everybody. So whatever you do, try to sort of like make it as good an experience as possible for yourself, and then it'll be good for everybody else. And so I realized like I was feeling scared and insecure, and I was like, man, I just don't want to go there and make a fool of myself. And so one day I just decided that everybody that I talked to who worked on the film, from Jeffrey on down, I remember the cinematographer was the first department head that I met with. And I told her, and I said, listen, I understand that being a cinematographer is hard. I understand that being a cinematographer on a movie that's low budget and has no time is especially hard. And like you have a difficult job ahead of you. And I said that also I have never done this before, and so I don't know what I don't know. There's going to be times when you say something that I don't fully understand what you're talking about. I said I'm smart and I'm a quick learner, so if you tell me, I should be able to get it, but there's going to be times when you say something and I don't know what you're talking about. And so if you don't want to do your hard job of being a cinematographer and occasionally serve as a substitute teacher for me, I totally get it. I do not begrudge you walking away from this job. That's okay. It's tough, and you can probably work with a director who's done this before and won't ask so many questions, but I'm not that guy. And so I had that conversation with everybody. Jeffrey Wright, every single person who worked on the movie, I told them that. And so what that allowed me to do was it allowed me to be vulnerable from the very beginning. It allowed me to. I was definitely afraid to go to work some days, but I never felt like I wasn't taken care of. You know, I felt like even though I was afraid, there was going to be people there who had my back because I was open with them from the beginning and told them, like, look, I'm not going to know things sometimes. And so I found people that were not just tolerant of my inexperience, but actually celebrated my inexperience. I found people who were like, I'm very excited to help you direct your first movie. And so I think that the lesson there for me is, like, I think that Hollywood especially, but I think that, like, all aspects, like, Hollywood's famous for people who throw things and yell and scream and belittle people and demean their assistants and stuff. And I think that that just comes from insecurity. I think that's sort of like the way that people deal with their insecurity. And they want to come in and scream and, like, chest thump. And the way that I dealt with my insecurity was I was just honest about it and said, we're going to get through this together, and I'd like to work with you. And so I think that when you're vulnerable and honest with people, you're gonna get sort of like vulnerability and honesty in return, and sort of like you're gonna find like people to collaborate with who are really gonna take care of you, and you're gonna feel more likely to take care of them because they're taking care of you. So that was probably to me the biggest lesson that I learned.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
So, Cord, do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, let's go to this underrepresented side over here. Is there one person over here? That's it. Thank you, Jesse Bravo.
Jesse Bravo.
That is a great name. You're
yeah,
right.
Jesse Bravo is incredible.
That's a great name.
Think about that forever.
Okay, this is the last question. It's going to be the best one.
No, I don't think so.
Nail it.
No pressure. I don't have a cool name, so I'm just not going to say it.
That's okay. I'm sure it's cool in its own way. What is it?
It's Lauren Rosen.
Oh, that's cool. Lauren Rosen. Woo!
With having the dual role as writer and director, how much freedom did the actors have to deviate from the script you wrote, and how did you deal with that?
Always. They could. I sort of like let them. So we always just shot a couple as written, and then if they wanted to improvise after that, then I let them do it. Sometimes they'd improvise in rehearsal after we'd rehearsed a couple times, like like when Cliff says, like, I'm gonna go take my lover right now. That was improvised, and I was like, yes, we found it. Just please say that. It's amazing. What else was improvised? Jeffrey Wright saying how white, like Brahmin white or Southie white. He improvised that. I was dying laughing. I think that there's very little. You know, I think that for the most part, like there's some things that like it's very important that you say this line as written, but for the most part, you know, I think that as long as people are just feeling loose and comfortable, and if they say something funny, it's like you have to use that. I think that to me is that improvisational nature is like, I love that stuff. The two of the best improvisers on set were Miriam Shore and Michael Cyril Creighton, who play Paula and John Bosco, the publishers. And like they would just go off sometimes. It was like so like they had the scene where he tells them he wants to call the book Fuck. We have the entire side of their conversation. I just locked it off. They'd worked together before. And I was like, I'm just gonna lock a camera and you guys just turn to each other and talk each other into calling this book Fuck. And I remember Miriam Shore goes, it's dangerous, but it's dangerous in a black way, which is... And I was like losing my mind. But then in post, you know, post is where we really found the tone of the film and sort of like walked the line between comedy and drama. And that was one of those things where I was watching it and I was like, this is so funny, but it's just not this movie. It's not the movie that we're making. It's sort of like I wanted to make a satire, but not a farce. And sort of like there was times when it got, you know, some stuff was very funny, but it started to feel farcical. And so I'd be like, we need to pull back even as funny as this is. And so I think that it's always good to just shoot it as written because you're sort of like there because of the script. Unless it's really not working and it's just like you feel. That's the thing too, is like just being as prepared as possible always helps you, just because then it's sort of like being prepared allows you to call an audible and say like, this is not working. let's shut it down for 15 minutes and I'm going to go rewrite this line. You know, like that. Sometimes you need to do that. Hopefully not, but every now and again you need to do that. And so I think that the key is shoot it as written, because the script is what got you there. But then once you've got like a couple takes that you're pleased with, then just let the actors riff a little bit and sort of have fun. I think that is, that's very frequently where you're going to get like really great stuff that you hadn't thought of before. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Tucson. I love you all. I love Tucson.